Hi, friends. Welcome to Encouraged and Equipped. On this podcast, we introduce you to the women of Christ Chapel Bible Church.
We love being encouraged to live out our faith in Jesus by hearing the stories of women in our church community. We are so glad that you're here. Hey, welcome back to Encouraged and Equipped. I'm Camille. I'm here with Brooke, and we are introducing this week's episode of Encouraged and Equipped, which is an episode with Kathy Harrelson and Sarah Hayes. And they are going to be talking about something I thought was really intriguing. Sarah calls it masking, which is essentially like putting on a mask so that you are not vulnerable with other people. So I was thinking about this topic of like, hey, do we get so used to wearing a mask sometimes that we're not really being our true selves? And I wonder, Brooke, as you think about this, like, have you ever noticed that you were not really being authentically Brooke Seal and you were wearing a mask?
That is a good question. I think I've definitely in other seasons, I think I have really wrestled with and struggled with wearing masks. I think the people pleaser in me is definitely prone to that. And by God's grace, I think I've seen the beauty of like finding ways to take those masks off and to do that authentically and vulnerably, and have seen the fruit of that and have been blessed by it. So I think my answer is both and. Like, I've definitely had seasons where I've wrestled with that, and by God's grace, I've experienced a lot of freedom from the weight of that and have walked in a lot of like authenticity.
Praise God for that.
In more recent years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. I think it's so relatable. Like, I think as I look back on my life and especially the last few years, like I can see moments of it too. And so I'm excited, listener, for you to hear this episode. I think Sarah's got a lot of wisdom to share. Also, listener, I just wanted to give you a quick little caveat that Sarah's going to share vulnerably her story. And part of that story is infant loss and also adoption. And so if you're walking in a season where that might be a heavy topic, maybe save this episode and come back to it for later. But without further ado, here's Kathy and Sarah's episode.
Hi, I'm Kathy, and I'm here with Sarah. And Sarah, welcome to Encouraged and Equipped. I'm so excited we get to chat today.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
This conversation, as you know, Sarah, that you and I are getting ready to have, actually kind of started randomly. We had emailed each other, but didn't know each other, and happened to run into each other one night in the summer after Women in the Word, and kind of just ended up in a 20-minute conversation. And we both were kind of passionate about the same thing. And we kind of started to talk about how we have a tendency to wear masks. And I think what I mean by that, and you can chime in as well, is we sometimes have this tendency to kind of put on a figurative mask, pretend we're something that we're not, or maybe just hide who we are from other people and not show them anything. Is that what you would say, or what would you add to that?
Yeah, I would add, especially in church settings. It's really interesting to see people inside a church and then they look really different outside of the church. And that rubs me the wrong way. Why is that? So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that when you talk about the fact that we do see that, and that's actually what we're going to dig into, we could talk about taking masks off in different contexts, but specifically, we're going to look at how we do that in the church. And I think, to be honest, there are a lot of reasons why I'm frankly tempted to do that.
Agreed.
Sometimes it feels more safe and secure. I feel like I won't get hurt. I can avoid conflict. I will just fit into whatever the context is. But what I've found is that as I've done that over time, I begin to feel more trapped and anxious, and it's just not particularly healthy. And I don't think it really kind of encourages and benefits the body. Have you kind of seen the same thing in your life?
Oh, I agree, absolutely. And real quick, a little caveat. We're not talking about those moments when you're crossing someone in the hallway and they say, hey, how are you? I'm not asking for a life story in the 8.2 seconds that you have before you round the corner and exit the hallway. We're not talking about that kind of openness. We're talking about when it's appropriate, especially in a Bible study setting, to be open about our lives and take off the mask. So I definitely am tempted to put it on, and I wear mine. I mean, sometimes I wear it, and I'm here to tell you to take it off, but I have my moments too. So the first situation would be when something's really new. So the first day of a Bible study, I'm still feeling people out, and I have a distrust of them. I'm not sure. Can they handle can they handle this? I don't know. Can they handle this burden? Or it could be something like that everyone around me seems to know a lot more about the Bible than me. So I'm super intimidated and don't want to speak up. And sometimes, I think you mentioned this, it's just easier. It's easier to let other people be open and to just, gloss over my own personal struggles.
And I can relate to every word you just said.
Yeah.
And what we're really here to talk about is we've all felt that trapped, anxious. We're all tempted to do it. So how do we, first of all, take off our own mask? And I would say, how do we create environments that other people feel comfortable being who God created them to be?
Yeah.
And even if it's different than me, how can I be a person that welcomes that is okay with people sharing their struggles, sharing their sin? What can I do to invite that? Right. And so our goal throughout this episode, I think, is for Sarah to kind of share her wisdom and stories.
I like that too.
Yeah. Is that your new name?
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get to hear, again, kind of dig in a little bit more to why we do that, what's underneath that, and then what truths God has given us to battle out of that so that we can experience the freedom, the joy, and also provide other people an opportunity to experience that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know that when we look at, particularly in the church, I know that there are a couple reasons, Sarah, you've thought about it a lot. So kind of introduce one of them to us. What is a reason, or how have you kind of seen that played out? Maybe it's not only in the church, but something you've experienced and maybe been tempted to do that may be really prevalent in the church.
Right. And I am a former teacher, so I've seen this in the classroom as well. There's an experts-only approach where we really don't know the answer, or we're afraid we have the wrong answer. So we'd rather just not say anything and leave it to the person in the room who has the most education about it or experience. So that's one time that I see people putting on masks, but also where I'm tempted as well to do that. And another one is that our church language changes so that when we're at church, we'll use phrases that we don't use out of the church. And I have found myself doing that even in preparing for this podcast. I was looking through my notes and I thought, I can't believe I just said that phrase. That's so, vague and unclear, but it makes me sound really, really pious. So
And I would say that I have been at moments where I feel the same way.
Yeah.
I think whatever my answer is, either it likely will be wrong, or someone else will know more than I do, or someone has said a phrase and I don't know how to participate. And to be honest, in most contexts, I don't think the people who are the quote unquote experts want me to feel that way. I don't think they want me to not share. I don't think they want me to not learn, but that is how I feel. And so I would love to hear, what have you seen or observed, or who has done that well that you've seen create an environment where you feel like you don't have to be the expert to participate or be who you are in any kind of room?
Right. Okay. Well, I've got a great story about this.
Okay, great.
I'm excited to share it. My husband and I were a part of a newlywed Sunday school class when we were in Houston. And our teacher was highly educated. So initially, I think we were all a little bit intimidated. But for an example of how he led the class, the very first day, we all sat down, and he sat down with us. That's the first thing, right? He didn't stand at the front and give a lecture. And he said, okay, well, what are the negotiables and what are the non-negotiables of faith? And he just dropped that bomb and just waited. It was so exciting to be invited in to figure out something very important to doctrine, and to be trusted that we could come up with the non-negotiables and negotiables of faith. It was just mind-blowing to me, who had been through Sunday school class after Sunday school class where it was just taking down notes. So that was really the first time that both of us studied. My husband and I studied with the teacher. So other things that he would do, he would give us a really controversial topic and put us in groups and say, okay, you've got 15 minutes, figure it out. And we would present, obviously 15 minutes wasn't really enough for these really big questions like, what is evil? But we did what we could, and we were able to wrestle with our faith ourselves and invite it into the study of the Bible, which was just wonderful. We didn't feel put down by the people around us. we weren't accused of being faithless by asking difficult questions. So that was a really wonderful place to, number one, become comfortable that, even on the days when as a class we couldn't come up with the deep theological answers, it was okay to see through that glass dimly and to have some, fluidity to our understanding of doctrine. But then other times we did get the answer because we were in community with a teacher who really encouraged us to participate.
Part of what I love too is I think about how even when you parent a child, sometimes when they ask you a question, you do need to just give them an answer. And sometimes you are the expert. But sometimes you can learn from them, or you want to give them the freedom to think it through themselves.
Right.
And so I think that I'm not currently teaching a Sunday school class where I would create that environment, but I can still respond that way to individuals if they ask me a question. Sometimes you just need to give them an answer, but sometimes, what do you think? Why do you think that? Creating a space, and then when they give me their answer, whether it's right or wrong, first of all, maybe it's something I've never thought of, but even if, let's just say if it was a wrong answer, but not immediately jumping on it with the right answer.
Yeah.
Encouraging participation, asking people to share, creating that environment where you want someone to learn and be able to wrestle with something and be able to not know something is a kind gift we can give to people, even just in one-on-one conversations.
Yeah, I agree. I think Jesus would have done the same thing. I mean, look at his conversation with Nicodemus. Nicodemus came with tons of questions, and Jesus didn't say, out of the door, leave. He was encouraging to him and inviting him in and answering his questions and helping him build his faith that way. So, yeah.
What are the things you most remember from that experience? What are a couple of things that you think, oh, those are some of my main takeaways from those class experiences?
Well, there isn't always just one right answer. Very rarely in Bible studies is there one right answer.
Sometimes there is, but sometimes there's a lot to be discussed and learned.
Yeah, if it's one right answer, it's usually one of those questions where everyone says, it's Jesus, and then we move on, right? That's the answer. Usually there's a lot of nuance. But I also we learned, it's okay to not know and to be open about that. I think that really invites other people in because we can kind of say, well, actually, I don't know either. And let's talk about that. So that was something really freeing to be able to question, not with the goal of creating division, but the goal of growing. That was different.
Something I really appreciate about people who will say, I don't know, or communicate they're not all there yet, even in their maturity. I think as a young Christian, I assumed that I would at some point get to a point where I did know, I wouldn't be God, but I would kind of know everything, or that I would reach this point of spiritual maturity where I'm not saying I would never sin, but it might not be that often, which is super naive, but somehow that's not really what the scripture teaches at all, but somehow I had made up that scenario of that's what's going to happen. And I had a pretty watershed moment in college where I remember I was really wrestling with something. And to be honest, at that point in my life, I hadn't had many people that were open about their sin struggles.
Yeah.
Not even with great depth. I didn't need to know detail, but just that they struggled.
Yeah.
And I remember a day that she sat across from me and was like, well, Kathy, I still struggle with doubting my faith sometime too. And I had never heard someone I perceived to be spiritually mature say that. And it was strangely freeing to be like, oh, I thought something was wrong with me because I still saw weaknesses in myself and I still saw sin in myself.
Yeah.
Whereas that is normal. That doesn't mean to say everyone needs to know every sin that I experience every time that I experience. But her communicating to me that not only I don't know everything, but I don't even live perfectly everything I know, was very freeing for me and paved a way for me to understand that solid Christianity, mature Christianity, godly Christianity included admitting your weaknesses in appropriate times and ways to communicate you weren't there yet. Yeah. And I would say she was a role model to me of admitting that you weren't perfect and that was very helpful for me.
Yeah, and healthy.
Have you had any experiences or environments where you felt like that vulnerability existed? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I definitely think so. My husband and I were a part of a re-engage group when we first moved here.
So what's re-engage if someone doesn't know?
First of all, it's amazing. It's a marriage boot camp for all situations of marriage provided by Christ Chapel. And you attend once a week and are in small groups. And so you have a small group leader, which is actually a couple who have been through the program once before. But it was really refreshing to be in that group as well, because we talked about really nitty-gritty stuff about marriage and grace and about God's role in marriage. And it was really a moment, too, where I saw people who were strong Christians, walked the walk, but also had gone through incredible struggles. And when you see someone else go through the same struggle that you've been through, it takes the load off. It's like it all of a sudden isn't as heavy. And so sin has a power over you until you realize that, someone else has gone through the same thing. For some reason, it kind of just lightens it.
That's really true.
Yeah.
I know that we've talked a little bit, first of all, about when it comes to responding to the struggle we feel to be an expert or have it all together.
Yeah.
Some of that is being in situations and environments where people have modeled that for us, showed humility. Is there any truth or reminder that you bring yourself back to when you're in environments like that? Because even when I know for me, I've experienced it, and yet sometimes it can still be tricky in the moment to actually choose to take the mask off.
Yeah.
Is there any truth about God or about the scripture that kind of grounds you or motivates you to continue to do that?
Well, now I don't sound as Christian because my response doesn't have to do with scripture or.
That's okay. That's all right.
I just fall back. Well, I guess it does. I fall back on prior experiences. A lot of times, the Israelites, they build all these altars, and frequently I've been really confused. Okay, great, you put some stones on top of each other. What does that mean? But really, when you read it, it's about reminding yourself of what God did for you at that time and place. And I have so many altars. I have so many moments where if I think back on my prior experiences, where being open and sharing what was really going on brought me such incredible blessing. God was so faithful through it. He used those situations to bless other people. Why wouldn't I do it again? I'm hooked on it,
That's really beautiful.
Thanks.
That's really beautiful. I also, before we kind of move on to the next one, you mentioned that Christianese or language maybe that we wouldn't use. And it's not funny, but it's kind of funny because I get used to talking with the people I'm around a lot. And I don't think it's bad per se to use Christianese phrases if it's someone who understands it. If you're speaking German to someone who understands German, speak German.
Yeah.
But if the person only speaks Spanish, then maybe don't speak German to someone who speaks Spanish because they're not going to understand if you want them to understand.
Yeah.
And so I started to think about phrases that I was trying to imagine if I just heard for the first time. Do you know what I'm saying? Like what I would think?
Yes.
Like phrases like wrestling with the Lord. Like I'm imagining like, am I getting into some like I can imagine that being confusing to someone. Or walking in the Spirit, covered by the blood.
Yeah.
God laid something on my heart.
Yes.
Even doing life together. Quiet time.
Yeah.
Now, again, if you understand what those phrases mean, that's helpful because we can communicate about it. But if you don't know what a quiet time is, I wouldn't imagine that a quiet time would be reading your Bible and praying because I just wouldn't come up with that.
Right.
Or doing life together. That's a Christian phrase. Not bad if you know what that means, but I can imagine that might be confusing and accidentally exclude someone from something you want to experience.
Yeah.
Are there any phrases that come to your mind or experiences you have? And again, I find myself sometimes using these phrases and then laughing at myself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said earlier, in the preparation of this podcast, used one. And so I was a little bit frustrated with myself. And this is not that big of a deal, but I was thinking about moments in our life when we were led to do something. Most people are not led anywhere, especially against their free will, right? So that concept of being led like a lamb or an animal is very Christian. And not that it wasn't true, but was I trying to sound fancy in that moment? Was I trying to, like you said, potentially exclude people who aren't part of my Christian bubble? what am I doing with that phrase? Why don't I just say something like, well, we were thinking about it a lot, and then God opened the door. Is that this is hard.
It is.
It's hard. We're so used to it. And we hear not just, okay, this is going to sound like I'm throwing all priests and preachers under the bus, but we hear it a lot, right? We hear it when people pray.
It's not necessarily
It's not bad.
but it can be really confusing
It is.
and make people who are newer, or even if you came from a different church. I've been in different churches where certain phrases were used a lot.
Yeah.
And then I went to another church or another group of Christians, and there were other phrases used a lot.
Yeah.
And it took a while for me to figure out what those were.
Yeah. So whether you're talking to someone who is in the faith or not in the faith, is that a phrase? Probably. It can be isolating.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I agree that creating environments that invite people in to ask their questions, to be who they really are, both their strengths and their weaknesses, to be able to bring that to the table is something that I think is honoring to the Lord, as well as really just what he wants us to do, because he created us a certain way and he knows our struggles. So we want to both do that ourselves as well as invite other people into that. But when I was thinking about it, and you actually, I've heard you use this phrase, kind of the God and me mentality can also accidentally prevent us from taking off the mask and communicating what's going on. And interestingly, I actually thought about it in two ways. And I'll tell you what they are, and then you can say, you can chime in, because I've heard the phrase from you. One way of looking at it was, I think some of us grew up in environments where we were encouraged to not talk about those questions, to not talk about spirituality, to not talk about religion, that what you believed is what you believed, but that wasn't meant to be discussed, or what you thought about that was just personally kind of socially acceptable or appropriate to not share. So it's just between you and God.
Right.
The flip side of that is, and this next one isn't all bad, because I actually think if you spend time with Jesus and are a Christian, I don't think you have to tell everybody every single thing. I think at times you and God having a secret, and I don't mean like a bad secret that you don't want to sin, you don't want to bring into the light, but you getting to share some experiences with the Lord is okay. But there have also been instances where I think some people, and I have found myself thinking, well, I don't want to invite others in because that's just God and me. Or God's the only place that I can feel safe. Or God and I need to talk about this or work through this by myself. Or I just need God. Yeah. And in a sense, I do need God more than anything else. And it's okay. But the God who knows everything and designed me put me into a community. Yeah. And sometimes I have a tendency to make it God and me as if that's the most spiritual choice. Well, this is just a me and God thing.
Let me work through it first. I'll be back with you.
Yes.
When I have the prayer answered.
Yes. And I think sometimes, to be honest, he lovingly doesn't answer me or give me something because he wants me to bring other people into it and bring community in. So I think either it's just me and God, I shouldn't talk about it, or it's just me and God, that's my safest or the best place, can create these masks or prompt me to put on a mask or not share something because I either think I'm not supposed to, it's supposed to be private, or that's just something that God and I are going to talk about and I'm not inviting others in.
Right.
Have you wrestled with either or both of those?
Yes and yes. Of course. I think we all do. I think we have times where some things feel too heavy to give to anybody but the Lord. And especially when you're getting to know new people in a group, or if you don't have an established group of Christian friends to share with, it's really intimidating. Takes, to share that kind of depth. Because what you're talking about are not small things that you're wrestling with. They're not little areas of your prayer life that are maybe lacking, or some kind of issue you're having with worship. It's something deep and really, really central to who you are as a Christian. So these are big things. They're hard to share, for sure. And sometimes, it's just easier not to say anything about it until God gives you the answer. And then you can say, guess what, guys? Here's my great testimony, and have that cheerful face without ever having to go publicly go through any other kind of struggle.
When I think about kind of both sides of that same coin, a couple of things came to mind. One, there's a person that I've known a very long time that grew up more in the environment kind of raised to think you don't really talk about that with other people,
Yeah.
your religion. Like, you may genuinely love Jesus, but that's just something you keep private. And I've seen that person over time develop some skill, choose to take off that mask. And it wasn't really because of me that they took it off, but as someone who didn't really know what they cared about as much or hadn't seen those sides of that person, as they chose to let me in, I actually felt like I got to know them better.
Oh, yeah.
It improved our relationship.
Big time.
And it was actually really beautiful to see a side of them I'd never seen before.
Yeah.
And so I don't think they were hiding from me or anyone in a particularly evil way. I just think they thought that's what they were supposed to do. And as they opened up, I have to tell you that, I mean, I hope they were blessed by it, but I have been hugely encouraged
Yeah, big
by
time.
seeing the Lord's work in their life because they chose to give me glimpses of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's something I wanted to mention earlier about our class in Houston. Yes, we were very open about our struggles and went through big questions in the Bible together. And because we did that, our relationships improved. We're all still friends to this day. We still are aware of what's going on in each other's lives. We pray for each other. We communicate. It builds incredibly strong relationships when you're able to be open or watch someone else be open, struggle, and watch God work in their life. It's just like cool. It's cool to watch, and it's for other people to be invited in to watch your struggles and watch God work in you. It's just really reciprocally cool.
I had a situation recently, a friend that had walked through a season of some very, very hard things.
Yeah.
And they, don't get me wrong, they talked to the Lord, they went to the Lord, but they also chose in a very difficult situation to actually not invite everyone in because it wouldn't have been appropriate. But a handful of people they did invite in. And it was really fun. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, I got this call at a time I don't usually hear from this person. And they were calling and they just said, I just have to tell you that after months, really over a year of these things being really hard, I have to tell you this really cool thing God did.
So cool.
And had they not chosen to invite, they shouldn't have invited everyone in, but
No.
a few people they invited in, my joy and gratitude and what I got to experience of the Lord and share with them and praise and thank the Lord for what he did for them was the hugest gift.
Yeah.
That they could have, quote unquote, kept it between just them and the Lord. But because I got to be in proximity to see that, I can't tell you how encouraging that was for me.
Yeah, you saw their altar.
I did. And it was beautiful. And
Yeah.
and I have to admit, as you know, like, relationships are difficult. We're not acting like this is super easy. We're not acting like, to be honest, when you choose to know hard things about people, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's grieving. When you bear someone's burden and grieve with people, like, it actually hurts. I don't want to imply that it's not costly. I don't want to imply that it always goes well. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Relationships are difficult. And I think you and I have talked about this before, that kids sometimes are, not all the time, but sometimes they're better at kind of starting and developing new relationships.
Well, for sure it is. I mean, how many friends did you have in second grade? It's probably a lot more than
Yeah. And admittedly, our lives are different, but
Yeah.
sometimes as adults, I'm not sure, because it takes time and energy to foster
It does.
that. And we are busy, and you are caring for many things.
Yeah.
Family members, your job,
Agreed.
where you live. Choosing to prioritize that and step into that, I don't want to act like it's simple.
It's not. Yeah.
So talk about that for a little while.
I think it's really difficult, especially, I don't know why, but since we've been in this stage of life where we have young kids, it's been really difficult for us to prioritize our spiritual growth, to prioritize community. You've got to set aside time for it. And even just looking at our schedule for the fall, I'll admit I'm a little stressed. And we've got a lot of like great things going on, Bible studies, small group, but it's a lot of days of the week. And so there is a temptation to, in a way, put on a mask by not going. And I think that's another part of it too. The first step in order to be part of a community, to enjoy the benefits and to see God work in it, obviously, is to go. So, I mean, go with your mask on if you have to, but go. And that's kind of been, because we've seen it work so much and so well in our lives, we hunger after it. so much. We're almost aggressive about it now because it's so important to us. We've just been fed and, brought back to life and encouraged by community. So we just want to keep doing it.
How has it looked like? How have you benefited from that community?
Okay.
You talked about how you battle for it, but what does it look like?
Okay, get ready. This is a good one.
Okay, great. Get ready. I'm ready.
So we moved here about 4 years ago, started getting involved with people at Christ Chapel, and I would say we were pretty moderately involved. So we knew a handful, more than a handful, we knew people, but we weren't like been here our whole lives, knew people. And then a few years down the line, we're pregnant with our fourth child, and it seemed as if we had miscarried at about 12 weeks. And that obviously is hard for anybody. It's late to miscarry, and our community at that time was on their knees. I mean, it was crazy. We had about a week between when we thought we had miscarried and our next appointment. We were just bathed in prayer. Turned out we hadn't miscarried. The baby was still there. So that was incredible to watch what felt like a miracle happen in our own little home. And then a few weeks later, my water broke, only at 17 weeks. And so that was a bit more, that's difficult to walk away or to bounce back from, especially for the baby. I mean, it's not a good, what's the word? There's not good percentiles for survival at that point. And once we found out what had happened, we decided to be super open about it, partially because that's my personality, and partially because we felt like this was a great moment for prayer and for support for our family. And it came pouring in. I was literally on like kind of a semi-bed rest situation. People came and walked our dogs. I had a friend drive up from that group in Houston to take care of my kids for a weekend. She took them to the park, filled up my car. Our friends sent food to us. They provided extra games and books for the kids to do so that I could rest. Of course, our families came and chipped in. We were just, in addition to all of that, bathed in prayer. This baby was supposed to be delivered within 24 hours. That's typically what happens, but he made it to a week. And there was still a heartbeat, and he had grown. And then we just kept praying, and they kept serving us. This community was just incredible at that point. And again, we had only been here for a few years. So it was a big testimony to how quickly you can really get involved if you prioritize it, which I think we had. In any case, week after week after week, there was still a heartbeat. And every appointment, I had about 20 people to text. And everybody was, again, on their knees for us and celebrating every Friday when I had that appointment, and there was still a heartbeat. So it was going really well. He survived an incredible 9 extra weeks when the baby was supposed to be delivered within 24 hours. Wow. 9 weeks. And he grew. He was actually my biggest baby compared to the other children that we had percentile-wise. And again, that whole time, our community was right there with us. And then, everyone's praying for us and everyone's rooting for our little boy. And he was doing so great. And it just really felt like, okay, he's going to make it. He's going to be that 14% that survive when the water breaks this early. So it was a big shock when he died. He was born at 10:30 at night. And, shoot. I try not to cry, but here we go. Mask is off. Okay. And he passed away in my arms at about 6:30 in the morning. Actually, no. Well, it doesn't matter. For this purpose, it doesn't matter what time it was. It was 6 in the morning-ish. And at that point, we had no expectations of our community. And again, we weren't asking people for this. We were just asking them to pray. And they did this voluntarily, everything that I had been talking about. And when Jack died, it didn't stop. It doubled up. A whole funeral was organized with a meal, so many flowers. More people attended than at our wedding. It was an incredible moment. My family drove up from all over the state. So did our friends from Houston. And we just were enveloped by our community at a moment where obviously we were grieving and kind of shocked by what had happened. So, And even going back into church after that everyone was really surprised how quickly we went back. But I think if they knew how much we were blessed by it and how much we wanted to bless others by it, they might understand why we were so quick to come back to church. And it happened just like that. My Women in the Word group was so supportive. And I remember reading through the Psalms during that time in the Bible. And after Jack died, I decided, okay, I'm just going to still read through the Psalms. I'm going to try and be that person who continues to seek after God. And it was hard, I will be honest to you. It was really hard to want to open the Bible and read Psalms about joy and God saving the poor and in healing. It just felt like, well, that didn't happen for me. And in the margins, I remember writing, God, how are you going to use this? How are you glorified by this? And just really genuinely not understanding how that God would be glorified by this little baby passing away. And well, surprise, surprise, he was. So I did not realize this, but some of my family members who came up to the funeral were really on the brink of moving away from their faith. And they said that coming to the funeral and hearing us talk about not being angry at God or accepting what had happened and understanding that God was still master of our lives and still king, it turned them back towards their faith. And unbelievable. And then just to hear after that, I had so many women come up to me from the church, people I knew, some people I didn't know. And they said, hey, I've also miscarried, and I'd like to talk to you about that. And we would get together and talk about that. So, and I'm here with you. I don't even know if this would have happened if we didn't have this moment where we were so struck by God's love and so embraced by him through community. I wouldn't be here so excited to talk to you about it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And even just the example of saying, hey, this was really hard and it still is tender. And both you being willing to take off your mask so that we can see the pain, but also through that, see the beauty of God using community, of God using you to be, God using the fact that you were honest with your community, that points to it was a risk, but we chose to do that. And I'm so glad that you did.
Oh, I'm so glad too. I mean, in my head, I remember thinking at the end when he is born and he survives, we're going to have this big party. God will look so great. He'll have saved the baby. And do you know, the baby died and God looks so great. I mean, what a world this is. And so it was a magical thing to be a part of. And honestly, sometimes my husband and I think, that was nice back then because we felt so close to God and we still hunger after that closeness and so close with our community. And so that's why we're, like I said, aggressive about community.
And I think that is an example. We don't know when those times are coming or if those times are coming, but to be a part of a body and doing that for others and others doing that for you, I think we can often be more effective when we have taken the mask off so that people know that and know how to help and we're honest about that. I think that is how God wants us to live.
Yeah, I agree.
I know that you have that same community, not just walked with you through that, but also some other things. Do you want to give us an update on that as well?
Yes, I do. I'm excited to do it. This is so funny. Since this whole situation happened, I've had this image of me with a microphone telling my story. And I didn't think it would be this microphone, but I just felt like it was important for people to hear about what God did in our lives. So our son died, and here's the part where I use the Christianese phrase. Are you ready? Here it is.
Okay.
We felt led to adopt. What that really meant, it was something we talked about a lot, and God opened the door. But at that point, we had been prepared for a fourth child. The crib was ready. The car seat was there. The kids were ready for a sibling. We had the space in the house. It just felt like our grief was doubled because I could no longer have kids because of what happened with our previous pregnancy. And we prayed and said, hey, God, we can't afford this. There's no way. Adoption is the costs are extraordinary. And we said, we can't pay for this. So if this is something you want us to do, will you remove the financial barriers? Because we still also felt unsure about whether it was wise to welcome in another child where we were still grieving the last.
Right.
he obviously wanted to have us move in that direction. But we also, at the same time, we felt conflicted because we knew that part of working with Foster Adopt was fundraising. And that meant going back to our community who had already done so much for us. We just felt conflicted about it. So we put aside money of our own, hoping, this should cover what we can, we'll have this ready to go in case whatever we fundraise doesn't quite cover it. But I can't tell you how quick it was. It was within weeks, we had the complete amount that we needed to proceed with the adoption. And then we were ready to use our portion too. And a friend called me and said, hey, do you need more money for the adoption? And I was kind of like, well, no, but I mean, we forgot to budget for travel funds. She's like, okay. And then she sent us the entire rest of what we needed to provide for the adoption cost. So it was incredible. We were able to start and finish the adoption process in 9 months, which is, a normal pregnancy. But for most people, it takes years. And we felt really, really blessed by that. And it was empowered by our community. And they didn't just give money. They also prayed over us. They prayed over the birth mother. They prayed as we were anxiously waiting to find out if we were going to be able to adopt. My Women in the Word table were praying for us weekly. James's Band of Brothers table was praying for him. Our small group, everybody was praying and still supporting us in really tangible ways. And our son came home. We had a baby.
Part of that, getting to walk with you through the grief and with the joy.
Yeah.
And that's what, when we take off the mask and let people in, people get to do both.
Yeah, they do. And we're blessed by it. And so I'm just like raring to go, ready to do that for the people around me.
I love your heart. That's so beautiful.
It's a little, again, aggressive.
No.
It can be a little much.
I do want to, as we begin to think about kind of what we've talked about, you and I have both shared very honestly why we care about taking the mask off and how we have experienced some of the blessing.
Yeah.
But I think we both have many moments where we've looked at ourselves in the mirror or walked away from an encounter where we have taken the mask off or tried to take the mask off, and we've been hurt by it.
Yeah, for sure.
And as much as you and I are committed to doing it and wish every story looked like some of the ones we've shared, it isn't always that way.
Right.
And so I feel like it would be appropriate for you and I to both be honest about how difficult it is at times, some of the things that we've encountered that aren't as encouraging, and how and why we continue even when we've had those negative experiences, because we have both had them.
Yeah, for sure.
What does that look like for you?
So I can think of kind of like categories of things that can go potentially wrong when you remove the mask. One great area of difficulty is prayer requests. I find that prayer requests can be a time where you can genuinely ask for prayer for people around you in your life. But I also try myself to ask for genuine prayer for my spiritual life. And in that comes giving some vulnerable information out. And sometimes it backfires. But I will tell you, most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time it does not backfire. Honesty tends to generate more honesty. And the more comfortable I am sharing some things that are going on with my life, despite potentially having it be brought up again in a negative light, it's going to make other people feel more comfortable to do that.
And when you say backfire, like you mentioned, like it may come up in a negative light.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean by backfire?
Well, like maybe I'm praying for patience, and maybe I make a comment later in the Bible study and someone will talk about how, well, that's just because you're not very patient, or say something like, well, I'm super patient. I mean, I've been thrown under the bus and for things that there's sin areas in my life, patience or controlling my tongue. But I think you have to handle those prayer requests with some wisdom and care.
Yeah, I can totally relate. What else have you seen that's been challenging or can kind of make you want to not share?
Right. Okay. So prayer requests are the first one. The second one is, and this is again, potentially just a personality issue, but I tend to fall into oversharing. Once I start talking, I can't stop. And the more anxious I get, the more I say. And so this is something the Holy Spirit and I are definitely working on. And I'm trying really hard to reel it in and to find the appropriate moment to tell my life story instead of doing it in the hallway as we're passing. And there's only 8 seconds before we round the corner.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I will toss in one. I think that sometimes I will share something that's really meaningful to me. And it's interesting to me that even after years of sharing stuff meaningful to me and still believing it's meaningful, someone's response to that can make me feel either awkward that I shared or encouraged that I shared.
Agreed.
And so sometimes if I share a struggle or if I share a sin or even if I share something that's meaningful to me, if I read on their face and their body language afterwards, I can just overthink and make up.
Yeah.
They probably thought I was crazy. They're not going to trust me anymore because they know I struggle with that or whatever. And so I wrestle with sometimes afterwards, just I overthink and almost have a vulnerability hangover of, oh, I wish I hadn't said that, or I wish I hadn't done that. And it's more because I become afraid of what you think of me because I've shared.
Yeah, no, I totally second that.
And so I wrestle with that some. And sometimes I even wrestle with if I've shared something really good or very joyful about what God has done or something that I'm excited about, I worry if people are going to think I'm being prideful or talk about God too much. I mean, I basically can overthink pretty much anything.
Hey, that's my superpower too.
No. You can be second, but I am first.
Okay, I agree.
I am first. And when I have shared something that is vulnerable or personal to me, I can very much worry about what the person is going to think about me. And I actually have a few instances kind of like you, if you share something vulnerable and then the person does actually use it against me.
Yeah.
And so I think there are real struggles that come when we choose to do that might want me to slow down from doing the next time. And I'll say that I find myself, which this is me being honest, sometimes I become anxious and fearful. Sometimes I begin to get defensive in my mind. And sometimes I run to the Lord.
Isn't that? Whoops.
And I'd like to say I always run to the Lord right away.
Yeah.
But I do think pushing back to, okay, God, I know what you've said about me. I know you know who I am. I know that I didn't do anything wrong in that.
No.
And if they do or don't misunderstand me, and I didn't do something wrong or overshare, I just need to live with, I don't really know. And I would rather, now again, this is once I've spent some time with him, I've worked myself into this. I would rather honor you by creating an environment where the other people can share.
Yes.
Or continue to be that person because that's who I think you want me to be.
Yeah.
And so I'm honest, though, that it feels tricky at times because I wrestle with what is someone thinking about me after I've shared if I think they didn't like it or I don't perceive that.
Right. I totally understand. Sometimes I think about obedience. God obviously has a lot to say about what we should and shouldn't do, but frequently in my mind, I feel like he's been telling me to just tell my story. And I have a tendency, because I'm sinful and very proud, to want to color my story with advice for people, which I probably have done in the past 30 minutes. So sorry about that. Again, I'm working on it.
You were kind of invited here to do that. So that may be a weakness at times, but we kind of did want you to include your wisdom with it. So no apologies for this experience. Okay.
But what I'm saying is I feel like, I remember right before the funeral, I remember thinking this is a lot of information. This is a lot of private thoughts with me and God. This is a lot of spiritual stuff. Do I share this? And I remember just being almost told, you to obey me is to share your story at this point. And so regardless of what people thought about it, which it was taken well in that instance, but even when it's not taken well, in appropriate situations, I am being obedient by sharing my story because God can use that and that ripple effect, and we don't know. And we have to be okay with that, maybe not seeing that come to light later.
And I'll say while we're talking, and again, this is not to discourage anyone from being vulnerable or taking the mask off, but I think Sarah and I both wanted to be honest about this because I think that you will probably experience things like this, and we want you to know that we have too.
Yeah.
And that we're hurt by it too. I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll share something meaningful and I feel like they should maybe at some point a week or so later call in and check in on it or let me know they prayed for it, or you express a need and it kind of falls. And for me, it was a big deal to share.
Yeah.
And it can be hurtful. And so number one, I want to continue to do that. And number, did I say 2 or 3? Whatever.
You're on 2.
I'm on 2. Okay, great. Number 2, I want to be sure that if someone shares something vulnerable or that they think is vulnerable, that I receive that from them and let them know that I value that and try to follow up with them about that. I'll even write a note on my phone. Hey, they shared that something is happening on this date. I could tell it really mattered to them. And so it does matter to me, but things are going to come up between now and then.
Yeah, it's hard.
And because they have shared, I really want to model that I do care. And so even if it's a text or whatever it is, those things kind of go a long way
For sure.
in communicating that they care and that I care. And that kind of buoys me to keep going. And I want to be that person and make those environments safe for other people as well.
Yeah, I love that. It's really important to follow up for sure.
Yeah. Well, as we kind of finish our conversation, I would love to know from you any final thoughts or encouragements, or just depending on whether someone is listening and they haven't tried or they feel like they've tried a lot and it's still hard and it hasn't borne the fruit of the stories of the positivity that we have shared. What do you want to say or kind of leave people with?
Oh, that's putting me on the spot. Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I talked a minute ago about the altars of faithfulness to God, and I think that's what I go back to. I wear a necklace. It's got a little ring on it, and it's the ring that the NICU gave us after Jack died. They had pictures of him holding it in his little hands and around his toes, and I just decided to make a necklace out of it. And now when I'm holding my adopted son, he plays with it, and that's my altar right there. And so I would encourage you to look back and be really thoughtful about where has God showed up for you, and specifically in community. And let's remember that, and let's fight for doing that again. And that's what motivates me, really. When something doesn't potentially go as well as I like, I just remember back to those moments when community was the hands and feet of God to us, and that just makes it worth it.
I love that. I think as I think about me answering my own question to you, I think that your answer resonates with me because I do have enough experiences to go back on and think, oh,
That was worth it. Yep.
But I also think in the moment when I've put myself out there or wonder if I should put myself out there.
Yeah.
Or when I think about other people that are listening and thinking, Kath, I've done this 100 times. Like, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I think for me, what I would say is God did create you exactly like he wanted to create you. And he even knows what your struggles are. And choosing to do that, I think, is walking in the truth of who God is and what he created in you. And sure, be wise. Don't overshare. Try to
find the right moment
people,
for sure.
but keep doing it because I think that's consistent with the truth of who God wants us to be. And you don't know who's watching or who else might a week or 2 or a month later remember or come back or learn something from that.
Yeah.
And even just me taking, like you said, that step of obedience. I did something a couple of days ago or shared something a couple days ago, and the person's response wasn't what I thought. And I kind of left with some of that regret of, and yet it kind of came back to, but Lord, that's who in that specific instance, I do think I'd chosen correctly. I don't always, but I kind of came back to, but that's who I want to be in you, is the person that does do that and does say that. And so I do think that sometimes people are going to respond well and sometimes people aren't, but choosing to walk in that truth at least builds that muscle in me of living consistent with how I think God wants me to live and how God created me. And that's, at least in the past couple of days, that's been where I've gone back as I've thought, oh, should I have done that? And I thought, I'm kind of glad I did, even though that little pit in my stomach still exists. I'm kind of glad I did.
Yeah. I mean, would you walk around Jericho 7 times and expect the walls to fall? No. So, I mean, sometimes, I feel the same way. Like, why am I saying this out loud right now? Does anyone care? Is this relevant remotely? Is this going to help anyone? We don't know how God's going to pull some walls down with that. You know?
And I do think that you and I do have the tangible stories we can see, but I think we have a lot of stories we don't see.
That's true.
And a lot of people that have modeled. I'm sure the person that I referenced has no memory of that conversation back when I was in college.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure she has no memory of that. And I don't know if she overthought it or wondered what I thought or would I think less of her. Like, I don't know if she overthought it or not.
Yeah.
But here, years and years later, that made a mark on me.
Yeah, it did.
And so sometimes we don't ever see, and I think that's okay too.
Yeah, agreed.
We hope you enjoyed that conversation with Sarah and Kathy. And, Camille, that conversation really made me think a lot about what we talked about in the pre, is just that idea of, do you wear a mask? Is that something that you've experienced freedom in? But I think, I would pose a question, Camille, to you as maybe a cap to the episode or even an application of some of the things talked about in that conversation. Just this idea of, yes, we want to take mask off and be vulnerable and be authentic, but do you have any wisdom of how we do that healthily and in a godly way?
I'm kind of living this real time as I think about, like, as I go out of this recording studio and into the rest of my day, like, as I see opportunities arise, I want to be wise, first of all. And so as I'm in conversation with people, recognizing that this is an opportunity to encourage people, but also to, like, recognize the goodness of the Lord in this moment. And so is it good for me to share vulnerably? Like, does it highlight the Lord's character? Does it highlight his faithfulness? Does it encourage the other person? But then also, like, maybe it's not. Like, maybe I don't need to be vulnerable in this moment, and I can hold on to that and pray for an opportunity to do that at a later time with that person or with somebody else that needs to hear it. So moving forward with a little bit of discernment, because sometimes I will open up my mouth and things will come out before I've prayed about it. But I think also just Sarah shared in such a way that was so, like, she's just bold. Like, she is not concerned first with how she's going to look in the circumstance or what it's going to mean for her reputation. Like, she is concerned about the Lord receiving the glory for these things. And so that emboldens me a little bit to say, like, hey, if I have an opportunity to do it and it's the wise thing to do, I'm just going to do it. Just jump in.
Yeah, I love it. I think there's some really good wisdom there, and I hope and pray that everyone that listens to this episode finds it encouraging and equipping. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. For more episodes, be sure to follow Encouraged and Equipped.